Well, good morning. It's good to be with you this morning. We are continuing our study in 1 John chapter 1. We're starting with verse 4 today, or ending with verse 4. And verse 4 actually kind of ends the prologue of 1 John. John had a unique tendency to, in his writings, to kind of start out, and the first four verses were usually the prologue. For John, he's got the Gospel of John, done the same thing, and 1 John here as well. So we're going to jump right into that this morning. Great to have you with me and with us here today, and I hope that everything's going well with you. 1 John chapter 1 verse 4 reads this: "And we are writing these things so that our joy may be complete." What a great statement, isn't it? Like I said, it kind of ends the prologue of this epistle, and getting ready now to jump into the meat of everything. And John just kind of tenderly writes and says, we are writing these things so that our joy may be complete. Now, translation differs on the wording of this text. Some scholars have translated it to read, "And these things we write to you, that your joy may be full." New King James Version kind of goes with that translation. Others, among which is the NIV, follow the Greek manuscript that reads, "We write this to make our joy complete." For the purpose of this lesson, we're gonna follow the Greek manuscript when we're talking about this passage this morning. As I read this verse, two things jumped out at me, or out to me, whichever you want to say that. John, the first thing was John made a point to say, we are writing these things. Now, the question come to my mind is why? Why did he say that? Why did he write that? Secondly, was John states in this, he says that our joy may be complete. I was intrigued by the fact that our joy can be complete. How? How can our joy be complete? What does that necessarily mean? Is there a period at the end of joy in our life, and it kind of makes it all complete? First, let's look at we are writing these things. We discussed in the beginning of this study who the author was. It was John. So it kind of was interesting when John says, we are writing these things. Was there multiple contributing factors, individuals, I should say, to this writing? I don't know. But we know this. 12 times in this letter, John says, I write, or I am writing. Now, 3 of those times, he says, I am writing. And in verse 14, actually, or 3 times in verse 14, I'm sorry. And then in verse 14 in chapter 2, he says it twice. And then he goes on with verses 21, 26, and in chapter 5, verse 13. I have that all done on my blog, and you can have that with you. You can see it there. Is he putting himself with the reader, or in one class, with the reader in one class? Is he joining the reader and himself in together? See, the pronoun we must be understood literally, because John, like the other apostles, preached and writes as an eyewitness and an ear witness, so to speak. Thus, John is not the only one to testify orally or with pen and ink. John stands kind of next to his fellow apostles, and he says then, we, parentheses, all the immediate disciples of Jesus, into parentheses, write this to make our joy complete. So everybody that was writing in this aspect, everybody that was joining together in this team aspect, remember, this is John just kind of lumps them all together. He says we. Now, secondly, John talks about our joy can be complete. The Greek word for joy is chara. Now, chara literally means joy. No big surprise here, right? Just thought you'd like to know the Greek word for joy. Whereas Gnosticism, by denying the atonement, and the personal office of God in the salvation of the world cuts off one great sphere of God's love and consequently one great cause of the believer's joy. Now, the greatest joy to fill the heart of the Apostle John and those with him is to see the believers increase in their grace and knowledge of the Lord Jesus Christ. See, he wants them to have full fellowship with the Father and the Son so that the believers live in full communion with God. So, all of this, man, some meaty stuff right here. So, what can we walk away with today? John writes his gospel to share of this union that we are to have with Christ. In his epistle, he writes that we all may find joy in this union with Christ. And today, I just think, to be honest, let us find joy in being one with Christ. It should be a joy, not a struggle. Our relationship with Christ should be an enjoyment. It shouldn't be a struggle. And I see it too many times today in the church, and you even see it in our world today. We see people who are married. It's not a joy to be married anymore for a lot of people. It's almost a struggle. We've lost the joy of the love that we had with one another. We need to go back and find that joy. You hear people say, well, I've fallen out of love with that person. How do you do that? They fall out of love with somebody. I think you choose to not love them anymore. I think you've chosen to allow situations to come upon in our life and cause us to go a different route. And that different route being away from that spouse. The same happens with us with Jesus sometimes. And what I want to encourage you to do today is to get back to finding the joy in Jesus. It should be a joy, not a struggle. When my kids were younger, I was kind of indoctrinated with kid programs, Barney and Winnie the Pooh. Now, Winnie the Pooh was one of my favorites. And I remember preaching a sermon once and used the illustration of being either a Tigger or an Eeyore Christian. And what I meant by that is that Tigger was one of those guys, boing, 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 bouncing all over the place, all off the wall, man. He was just happy-go-lucky. He was just excited about life. Eeyore, on the other hand, Eeyore was just walking around, and just whining and complaining and moaning. And I find too many times we see people in the church like this. And I encourage you to be a Tigger Christian, not an Eeyore Christian. What I was trying to point to was the fact that we should be filled with joy and allow it to be displayed in our lives. Church, listen, it takes 72 muscles to frown. It only takes 14 to smile. So let us find our union with Jesus joyous, not a burden today. Hey, God bless. Have a great afternoon. We'll see you later.